and welcome to A Seat at the Table. I'm your host, Joyce Coronel, and we have an exciting show for you today. I think you're really going to enjoy hearing from our special guests. With us in our studios today, we have three esteemed members of the National Catholic Media joining us, including J.D. Long Garcia. He's the senior editor for America Media. Gretchen Crow, she's the editor-in-chief for OSV News, and Carol Zimmerman. Carol is the news editor for National Catholic Reporter. Welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here. So I want to hear, we'll just start out by making this a wonderful conversation. I want to know some of the different news outlets where you've worked over the years. And JD, I'd like to start with you. Yeah. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, my first publication, officially, my first grown-up job was with the Catholic Sun, which, and I don't know if you remember, but they had to make sure that I could speak Spanish, and you were in the interview.
That's right.
Yeah. So you grilled me in Spanish.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So I tricked you, and they hired me, and so that's where I started, and my life's been better ever since. I've been in Catholic media for about 20 years now. And it's just, but I feel like it's a great vocation, and a great blessing, to be able to be with colleagues here and, on the show and to talk about it and to serve God in that way, really. So.
You're very humble. You're all so accomplished. I want to hear more about you. So how about you, Carol? Tell us some of the different outlets where you've worked.
Well, I started at the Catholic Standard as an intern, and then I got a job there as a reporter, and that is where I met my husband, Mark Zimmerman, who's still the editor there for all of these years. And then I worked at Catholic News Service for 30 years until it closed, and then I just keep moving. I went to the Tablet in Brooklyn for a year. I was their national reporter, and now for almost a year, I've been national news editor at National Catholic Reporter.
Wow, amazing. Okay, and how about you, Gretchen?
I began my career in Catholic media for the Diocese of Arlington, Virginia. And so I worked with some wonderful colleagues there at the Arlington Catholic Herald. And then I was there for about 9 years and then made the move from Arlington, Virginia to the Midwest, where I started working at Our Sunday Visitor.
Okay. All right. So you've all had a lot of different experiences. Why did you choose Catholic media? I'm just curious. There's so many different options, especially now. Why did you choose Catholic media? How about you, Gretchen?
Well, I was on track to be an award-winning journalist for the Atlanta Constitution, Journal and Constitution. That was my dream. I grew up in North Carolina. I attended the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. They have an excellent journalism school there. And so I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to tell stories. I'm a lifelong Catholic. And when I was at Chapel Hill, I became very involved in the Newman Center. I just met some great people. I started getting more and more involved. And by the time I graduated, I knew that I couldn't leave the wonderful culture, Catholic culture behind, that I wanted to continue just advancing in my faith and growing in my faith. And so but I also had this great interest in writing and reporting and talking to people and telling stories. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if I could put this together somehow? But I had never heard of Catholic media until one night I was at Duke University. I did like a year of service. We had a speaker over and he was talking about how his wife worked for NC Catholic newspaper at the time. And it's how she was serving the kingdom through her work in journalism. And I thought, oh, I want to do that. And so I started emailing around and found a job in Arlington.
That's amazing. Wow. And how about you, Carol? Why did you choose Catholic media?
It sort of fell in my lap. I mean, after college, after I graduated at University of Maryland with a degree in journalism, I wasn't positive what I wanted to do. And then someone told me had the Catholic Standard had an opening, and I thought, okay, I'll try that. And I thought also similar that I loved my faith and was still kind of figuring out my faith, as we all are. And also I loved writing. So why not mesh them together? It seemed like a great fit. And also similarly to Gretchen, the idea of just being able to tell stories. I mean, we can get into this more later, but just the broad lens of the things that fall under Catholic media. There's so much. And it's not like you're just writing about politics or you're just writing about sports. You can write about politics and sports and Catholicism and the whole gamut. So I fell in love with it then, and
And here you are.
I still love it.
And how about you, JD?
Yeah, funny you should ask. I don't know so much that I consider that I chose it myself. I went to the Cronkite School here, and I decided while I was getting my degree that I did not like journalism. So then I went to grad school to try to escape it. And after grad school, came back home after being rejected from 7 PhD programs, and I needed to get a job. And my mom presented me with a copy of the Catholic Sun that announced they were hiring for this position. I said, Mom, I don't think this is what God wants for me. Clearly, I'm supposed to go, bring Thomism back into the world, and in contemporary dialogue or whatever with a PhD. Or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, in the meantime, somebody's got to pay your college loans, So anyway, so that's how that started. So I feel like in a way, it's not so much that I chose it. Maybe God kicked me into it like a dog into a river. So it feels like I was kind of thrown into it, but then really got swept into it and learned. And then the nicest thing is that when you go places as a Catholic journalist, people actually want to see you. Yeah,
that's true.
Like when I was working at the state press, very briefly, nobody wanted to talk to me. This is the ASU paper, but nobody wanted to talk to you. But everybody's excited when you show up, especially in the diocesan world. I get something, I get better welcome like St. John Vianney and Goodyear going out there than I would at home. Everybody's so excited that you show up. So anyway, so it's been kind of something that I've discerned over time. And that's something I would have chosen for myself, but I do think that God chose it for me.
And you were a natural for it, and you still are. I mean, just the whole gift of photography that you brought to the Catholic Sun, your storytelling, and all of you. I've followed all of you in your careers, and I just feel blessed to have you here in the studio. Talk about some of the more groundbreaking stories or really exciting stories. We talked a little bit about that before the show. There are some stories you don't remember at all, and then there's some that are like, that one left a mark. So I want to hear about that. Let's start with you, Carol.
I think something that left a mark with me, my last year at CNS, my colleague and I, Chaz Muth and I did a series on church and race. So it was podcast, video, and print story. But we really went in depth with the church's response to race. And we acknowledged right from the start that here we are, two white people, and we have no answers. But we interviewed a lot of people and went really in depth about things that were hard, challenges that people had faced, and also how the church responded. And I just felt like it was a real challenge, but I felt like we brought light on something that was worth discussing. So I was proud of that, and I just thought we did a good job.
Beautiful. And how about you, Gretchen? What stays with you? What story have you told that was just pivotal, groundbreaking, or just really you carry with you?
Well, I loved the big events that I got to cover. Pope Benedict coming in 2008, Pope Francis coming in 2015, which is incidentally when my husband proposed at the canonization mass for St. Junipero Serra as I was working at that mass, which was hilarious. But and then, it was just over in Rome for the election of Pope Leo. So those big events are amazing because they're a time of such great excitement and unity, and you feel like the whole world is Catholic. Everybody is just in it. And it's just, especially when you're young and experiencing something like that, an experience of church like that is just incredible. But then I would also go completely to the opposite end of the spectrum and say that some of the most memorable stories I've ever done are those one-on-one conversations with people where you really get into what makes them tick, why they are where they are, how God has played a role in their life, and how he continues to unfold in their lives. And those are have been some of the most moving experiences for me as a reporter and a writer. More than once, when you leave an interview very moved to tears because you're experiencing through the other person their experience of God.
That's beautiful. And those are people that are not people of great fame that others would know about, but I'm with you. Those are great stories. How about you, JD? What are some of the more pivotal stories would you say in your career?
Yeah. So I was born in the Dominican Republic, so I grew up speaking English and Spanish, but kind of bicultural. And so, consequently, I got assigned some of the Spanish speaking stuff, at the Catholic Sun. And so through that, in addition to like reporting on things on the border, but I also came to know more about how Mexican Americans celebrate their faith. And that's not something I didn't grow up with that, being from the Dominican Republic. But my Mexican brothers and sisters really taught me a lot more about my faith and especially about the Blessed Mother. So I feel like I was converted by them. And they have so many beautiful traditions, and these little like las posadas, and las pastorelas, the play, and just there's so many those matachines. There's so many beautiful things that I didn't know about, and I feel like I've come to love our Mother Mary in a completely different way through their witness and their example. And the only thing, if I can just say one other thing, for me, again, being from the Dominican Republic, the connection, Catholic Relief Services used to send people overseas. One year they sent a few of us to cover the earthquake aftermath in Haiti. And being from the Dominican Republic, there's been like historically just some really very ugly history that I'd be ashamed of as a Dominican about how we've treated Haitians historically. But to be able to be there and to see how their strength, in a way, in recovering, and just like that, their how they came together, and how the strength of community that exists in Haiti, despite the poverty. I mean, the poorest country in this hemisphere, really put things in perspective for me. And I mean, I keep that with me in my heart, my Haitian brothers and sisters. I'm trying to learn Haitian Creole a little bit myself, not too. But anyway, those are, I would say, some of the biggest things that I remember.
The ones that stay with you.
Yeah.
Well, and we all know that the biggest story, of course, in Catholic media this last year, the death of Pope Francis, and then soon on the heels of that, the election of the first American pontiff, which we were all told, how many people told you we'll never be an American pope in our lifetime? And here we are, a Southside Chicago pope. I mean, what was that like for you to cover that? What was that like, Carol, covering this, the death of Francis and the election of an American pope?
Yeah, well, the day that I was still asleep, my husband came in the room and said, Pope Francis died. I was like, and then it was just like immediately set up the computer and get people going. And I feel like that coverage, I was here for the conclave for Pope Francis' election. I was in Rome, so that was exciting. But this one, I was here in the United States, but I felt kind of like an air traffic controller, kind of like we had people there. They were sending stories, and of course, they're 6 hours ahead. Was it 6? And so it just was getting up early and just getting stuff as soon as they had it, and but so exciting. And still, on the day, when the Pope comes out and they say, we had Habe, I'm not going to say it right. So,
Habemus Papam.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh, I want to be there. But also still watching it as many did on the TV screen, is still very dramatic. All of a sudden you're just like, we all had that collective sigh, I think, across the, just like.
Were you at work with staff?
No, because, we all work remotely. So I was in my bedroom watching on TV and just like,
oh,
but
big. Yeah. That's big. How about you, Gretchen? What was that like? I mean, you were there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So a couple of days after, the Monday morning, Easter Monday, we had set up, OSV News had gone through this very complicated system of doing all of these emergency bypasses on your cell phone so that if the news came in the middle of the night, then we would be able to break through and wake each other up. And Cindy Wooden of CNS called me at 4:07 in the morning, and it did not go through because she was not on my emergency bypass. But Paulina, my international editor, who lives in Poland, called me at 4:15, and that woke me up. And but I was totally out of it because I am not a morning person. And my husband looked at his phone and said, Pope Francis died. And same as you, Carol, it's just like, okay, it's go time. I mean, Catholic media, and this sounds horrible to say, and I don't mean it to sound macabre, but when Pope Francis went into the hospital in February, that got everybody just like, we have to be ready. You have to be ready. And so, I think we all had a plan, and you just put the plan in motion. And then, a couple of days later, I flew over to Rome, where I stayed for the funeral and for the conclave, and for all of the Novendiale masses, the conclave, and then the election and the inaugural mass. So it was an extreme emotional roller coaster, because as a journalist, you're working hard. But then as a Catholic, you're experiencing something that doesn't happen very often and has happened for centuries. You're living it, and you really get the sense of living history. And, I was in St. Peter's Square when we saw the white smoke. When he came out on the balcony, we found out it was an American. I mean, we heard the name and we're just like, oh my gosh, now it's really go time. So it was incredible. It was an amazing experience.
That is definitely a story that'll stay with you. I know we were all here as a staff watching it on a big TV and the cheering, and I got choked up. I mean, a lot of us did. It was very moving. How about you, JD? What was that like? The death of Pope Francis and then seeing the election and you have some Chicago ties as well, right?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
Oh, sorry.
Because I'm a Cubs fan.
We won't hold that against you.
Yeah. So I'm ignoring this pontificate. No, just kidding. Well, from here, I should say, I worked for the LA Archdiocese for a few years, and now I'm in America with the Jesuit magazine. And so America, a team of us went over to Rome to cover it, to be there. So I was able to attend Pope Francis's funeral. The first time I've attended Mass with the President of the United States, he was there, not very close to me, but so that was kind of very special for the morning, to be able to be there, because he's such a special, I think for all of us, he's been such a special Pope Francis. And, I don't know how well we've mourned it, actually, because we get caught up in the news covering, in Catholic media. But I just tell you, like, I showed up really, for the day of the Thursday, the Wednesday, you were there. So the Grace Monk's like, everybody left. There's so many people show up just to watch a chimney. It's kind of a weird thing about our faith, So then on the day of, my job was to report on Voice of the People, Vox Populi, if you want to sound fancy. Mm-hmm. And so I'm there in the crowd, too early, didn't bring enough water. So then I'm making friends. I have hours waiting for smoke to come out of this chimney, And so I make friends with everybody around me. And I'm like, okay, hey, don't leave. I need to ask you how you feel about it after we find out if it's white smoke. It's such a weird series of questions to lead up to that. And so then it's getting hot. It's hot, and everybody's dehydrated, and everybody's waiting, and then it just. I can't tell you how this just doesn't make sense in retrospect. But it felt like everyone knew it was about to happen. Like in the group, it was just felt like everybody just like leaned in and then the white smoke happened. But it's almost like the spirit. Like I'm just so convinced. And the sound, there was I've never heard a sound like that in my life. It was so loud. Everybody just like shouted for joy. And all this politicking of, people were speculating, it's going to be this person, it's going to be that person, or whatever. I talked to one Italian guy, and of course he wanted to be Italian. But nobody cared. It was white smoke. The Holy Spirit has chosen the successor of Peter, and everybody, hundreds of thousands of people were in for it, and were just, ecstatic for it. And, there's never been an experience like that in my life, and I probably never experience it again. It's such a blessing to have been.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's a lot of emotion in that. So, as you look back over your career, and you guys have all had amazing experiences. I know that you have. It's so many stories. What are some lessons that you've learned along the way? Because I know you've learned lessons. Like, how about you, Gretchen?
Well, I would just say that discernment of God's will I mean, always, right? So anytime I'm working on a story or have to deal with somebody who might be challenging or working on a topic that might be difficult, I take it to the Blessed Sacrament. I mean, honestly, even if there's a difficult editorial I'm trying to write or something like that, and to remember that this is not the Gretchen show. This is not something that, I'm here to do to make my name, glorify my name. It's to glorify the name of God, and to remember that anytime that things seem difficult, or covering a difficult or challenging story, that we really have to surrender that to the Holy Spirit. So that's been a huge lesson for me in work, and I think that it has translated over to my personal life as well.
Mm, beautiful. How about you, Carol? What are some lessons that you've learned along the way? So many stories, right? So many experiences.
Still learning the lessons. I guess first off, I'd say almost every story, everything that happens, so many things that are going on, there's always a Catholic angle or a faith angle. I mean, sometimes you think, oh, there's nothing to write about. Well, that never happens, because there's always something to write about. And there's always some kind of faith perspective. I mean, we're telling the stories, the news stories, but through the lens of faith. So, people have their ways of looking at the big news, things that are happening now with immigration or with Medicaid cuts or, anything, war. I mean, there's a faith perspective to look at that. And I feel like it's just so key to bring that in, and that so many people they express their faith differently, but it comes right down to they want to talk about their faith, or they maybe can't fully express it, but there's something there that they hold on to. And I mean, just for one little example, this just came to my mind, but after Katrina, we were down there talking to people, and I was like, oh man, I hope we get someone to talk about their faith. but sure enough, almost the very first person we're talking to she says, they lost everything. But then lo and behold, in the top of this tree was their daughter's baptismal gown, untouched. Like everything else was ruined, but that was still there. I mean, I know that's just a simple sign, but for her, it was a sign that, that she could hold on to her faith and that God was still with her or something. But there were just things like that. I mean, often in tragedies, there's something that people still hold on. They've been through so much, but they hold on to their faith or some little sign that they got. And then, I'm just standing there and like, it's powerful.
Well, and sometimes their faith in God, and God is all they have left, right? When we tell stories of the homeless or people that have really gone through an extreme situation like that, very often that's when their faith really has a chance to bloom, and we can capture that. We can take a tragic story and we can do it through a lens of faith, as you say. So how about you, JD? What are some lessons along the way in your Catholic journalism?
We talk about all human beings being created in the image and likeness of God, and that human dignity kind of is the part of Catholic social teaching. It's at the foundation of Catholic social teaching. And you did a series for the Catholic Sun about your Catholic neighbor.
Your Catholic neighbor.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things the Catholic media does really well is tell those stories of people. They wouldn't appear in another newspaper. They wouldn't appear in another magazine or another website. But their voice is just as important. I mean, to God, in God's eyes, their voice is actually just as important as Pope Leo's. And for us to stop and listen to their story, I think that's just transformative. And so when somebody cuts you off when you're driving, or maybe in line at the grocery store or whatever, I mean, there's all sorts of these little annoyances, to just kind of stop and wait and think and recognize that this person has a whole other story, has all these other things that are going on in his or her life, and that person is just as much a reflection of God as I am, as all of us are, and that God loves that person just as much. And so just to stop to recognize that. And I think that the discipline of journalism, specifically Catholic journalism, that recognizes the dignity of the human person, I'm still learning that because I still get upset. I still get annoyed and everything, right? But just to stop and recognize that, that's the relationship that we have, the primary relationship to God and to each other. So, yeah.
Those are good lessons. Well, we're kind of winding things down here. Obviously, we're living in tumultuous times. We're living in times when things are very divided. Sadly, even in our church, you have people that are no longer speaking to each other because they disagree on whatever, what have you. How important is it at this time in history for us to encourage people to listen to a variety of voices? How important is it that we have professional journalists, Catholic journalists who are telling stories through a Catholic lens? What would you say to encourage people to see the nuances and to be able to not get so polarized as we are right now? How would you comment on that, Gretchen?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. And I love that we're sitting here in this room with a representative from American Media, from the National Catholic Reporter, from OSV News. And I think each one of us would agree that, that it has to start with listening. We can't come together if we do not listen to one another. We can't listen to one another unless we talk to one another. That's where it has to begin. And that's why I think the things that we do are so important. We stop, we talk, we listen, we try to draw out from the other person an understanding of that person's dignity, of what makes that person make the decisions that they make or say the things that they say. And the challenge now, I think, is to make sure that other people are listening. We can provide those stories to the world. We can figure out different ways and creative ways to tell those stories. And we should always be on the cusp of figuring out what can reach audiences better. But to try to help people to listen more, and to try to tell those stories more effectively, I think is our task, and it's a task that needs to be done well.
Mm-hmm. And Pope Leo had some strong words on this to journalists. One of the first things that he did was he spoke to journalists. And talk to us a little bit about that, JD, because he talked about us being peacemakers and not using fighting words. What did you think of his comments to journalists?
Yeah, they were very challenging. I had to go home because I had to get back home for Mother's Day. So I missed that part of I wasn't there for that, but I feel like it's very challenging when so much is fueled by division and by like conflict. So, sometimes those are the stories that get the most engagement online are the ones that are the most controversial. So to make peace, those peacemaking stories, then maybe a little bit less interesting. So I would say that like even, I work for a magazine for America, but not everybody on the magazine agrees with each other either, right? So even within our own, I don't know how it was for you guys, but like, we have to figure that out even on our own staff about how do we listen? Like Gretchen is saying, how do we listen? How do we, and how do we understand the other person? But at the same time, we have to be true. We have to be committed to telling the truth as journalists. And as Catholics, I think it's even more important because I think there's such a danger of people distorting the truth because they're trying to win arguments and they're not really, they're not surrendering to the truth. Right.
Right. The fearless pursuit of the truth, no matter where it leads, right? That's what a journalist does. So, and how about you, Carol? Just if you maybe want to weigh in on that and just this era of polarization, how important is it to have a lot of different voices reporting on these issues?
Absolutely. And I agree with both of these lovely colleagues. But I also think, it's just, our church is a big tent and there's people of all extremes. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, just from how they express their faith from one to another. And over the years, I remember that I've interviewed people that were so anti-war that they would throw blood on something, or you're just in their protest. And then other people that, maybe would never do that, or they attend the Latin Mass or something. But we are all one faith, and that what both do comes from their faith, and maybe people express it in a different way. But I guess I've just felt over the years myself a respect for everyone that I talk to. Maybe I wouldn't do exactly what they did, but that's okay. I mean, they are trying to live out their faith as they feel. And we're presenting the truth. We're presenting stories of what people are doing, and that will inspire some, and maybe will inspire someone to do something similar, or will inspire someone to at least say, how do I live by my faith? And it's not just something that I say or do on a Sunday Mass, but how do I live it daily?
Thank you so much. And you're, all of you, so gifted. We really appreciate you being here with us today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today at A Seat at the Table. Please subscribe, like, and provide your comments below for future episodes. Have a blessed day.